Hello, and welcome to Marriage and Money, a conversational podcast about personal financial topics aimed at taking the money stress out of marriage and turning the focus to enjoying life together. This is a weekly discussion brought to you by a seemingly financially incompatible couple bonded by the legal contract of marriage. My name, of course, is David, your favorite saver, and I'm joined today by the woman who I share multiple joint accounts with, Heather. I would want no one
Hello.
else to be sharing those accounts with.
I got all those accounts, right?
You got and you got your my power of attorney, so you could run off with all of that money tomorrow. Not that it's that big of a pile, but I guess it's yours. We have a great show for you once again today. Today we're going to be talking about how to manage your family finances. I know,
Ooh.
big topic. But first, before we get into that, I want to check and see what's going on with you, specifically what's happening in our financial life over the past week.
Sure. It's a good week. I'm sitting here with my favorite person talking about a fun topic.
It is
Uh,
fun. I like it. That's why we're doing the podcast,
I
right?
know. I agree. That's what I'm saying. So, what's new? So, we did have an unexpected expense recently this week, and anytime you get one of those, a pretty big size one for us.
Big for
So,
us, yeah.
anytime you get something like that come up, it's a bit of
It's a
a
little bit of a
pause.
punch to the gut. At least that's how it feels to me. It's like, oh gosh, what do you do? Um, but I think this is exactly the kind of situation where good planning comes into effect, right? So while it was a punch to the gut and unexpected and not fun, we were able to cover it because we had that in our savings, right?
Yep. Yeah, it wasn't an emergency or anything. It was just more of a, oh, this wasn't part of the plan, and
Right.
what are we gonna do? And then we figured it out.
Threw off our monthly budget quite a bit, but yeah, we had to adjust. And that's kind of the name of the game, right? With all personal finance, you can't plan for everything,
Nope.
and so you have to be flexible when things come up.
But you do know that things are gonna come up, and so you need to plan for those unexpected emergencies. Or this wasn't necessarily an emergency, but more of just unexpected. Um,
Surprises, you shouldn't be surprised that surprises happen
right.
because they will
Exactly.
happen.
So be prepared.
Yes.
Be prepared.
We should have a
Sorry.
segment. We should have a segment dedicated to you singing. I think
Ooh,
that
I
could be
like that.
fun. You definitely don't want to hear me doing that. All right. Well, let's get into our primary topic: managing finances as a couple, or really managing money as a couple. I think this is an important topic. Now, when you say managing money as a couple, that could include a ton of different things, and a ton of things that we've already talked about, and things we will talk about. Specifically, here we're talking about how you decide to join finances or not join finances when you come together as a couple, right? And I think this is an important thing to show, um, is an important thing to talk about because this is really important as far as how you describe your entire family picture, your family
Yeah,
financial
sets the
picture.
ground. But I love this topic, this
Ooh.
conversation. I do. I am super nosy. And I ask all my close friends and our couple of friends. I love to get in this discussion. And I have asked so many people. I could actually probably do a study on it because feel like I have so many data points of different couples and how they handle their money in their marriage. I find it fascinating.
And you're really good at it. So I just want to throw in there that Heather can get people. If you haven't met Heather, or if you want to meet Heather, I warn you, because after she sits down with you for maybe it takes an hour, maybe there might be a drink involved, but she'll get you to
Or
say
two.
something that you wouldn't have told anyone else, and she'll get you to open up about it in a unique way. So I think
Just
that's a
little
really unique
secrets. I mean,
quality.
I don't get like their account numbers or anything.
Well,
It doesn't
no.
go that far, but I could, peel off a couple layers of the old onion.
So
So
this is a favorite thing for you to
it
dive into with people.
is. It is. I just think it's so interesting because so many people I know that are married have gone so many different directions with it, and it's just interesting.
It is. I think it's interesting because, at least it's interesting to me, because there are a few different ways, a few key ways, three main key ways, at least, that I've seen that people jump into this, and they have varying results. And so I think I'd like to jump in and talk a little bit about that in more detail today. So
But I think before we get into the
yeah,
three ways, I think when you come together as a married couple and you're talking about how to set this foundation, number one, you need to come to the table and show everything. What do you got? What's your financial picture, both of you, right? So before you're going to figure out how to manage it, it's like, what are we managing? Are we managing a whole lot of debt or a big pile of cash? What do we got here? So I think step number one is no secrets. Let's put everything out on the table. Lay all the cards out, as they say,
yeah,
and then
that
figure out how to
honesty is really
shuffle it.
important with all aspects of marriage, right? Communication is key, and certainly no more so than here. And if you have, it's also a really hard place to be honest and to be open because you likely have most people. I mean, I certainly had things coming in that I wasn't proud of financially. I was coming in with some financial baggage, and it's
And
like,
some really ugly used furniture. No, I'm just kidding.
and the furniture I would say was an asset because it meant that my financial picture was a little bit better than it would have been otherwise. So you're welcome. But yeah, I think it's something where we have to have that full financial picture, and we come into in a marriage, and we're oftentimes ashamed of what we're coming in with, and we want to hide that. And so sometimes we people will go to lengths to avoid having those conversations or to just cover it up completely, and that needs to be avoided. So the article that we one of the articles, and this is again one that you found, I think,
You're welcome.
which is linked to in the show notes, is one around three different ways to manage money, and I think these are the same three ways we've seen and you've found in talking with friends and as you've had conversations. And those three ways, and we'll go through each of these, but just real quick first, those three ways would be managing finances as separately individuals, managing them joined together, and then third, managing it, taking some type of a hybrid approach between those two. And I think those are the three main ways. Have you seen any other ways?
No, I think those are the main branches. I think they can look different, especially the hybrid way can have a very different approaches how you look at it. But yeah, I think simplistically those are really the three options you got.
Sure. Okay. So let's just start at the first one here, and I'd like to hear let's talk about what we think about each of these items, get your impression on it. So first, uh, the separate approach, where each person, just to give a definition here of what we mean by separate, we mean each person before they were together had their own bank accounts, they had their own retirement accounts, they have everything, all their money is separate, their paychecks are going into their accounts, and there may not be visibility into what's in those accounts from the other person, right? um so some of let's talk pros and cons on that.
Sure. I like to call this the gotta keep them separated
A little offspring
option. I don't know
reference
if
there.
anybody knows that. Maybe
Oh
they
gosh, I
didn't.
listen to a lot of offspring. Oh, come out and play. Let's go out and play.
So I think this option is kind of the easy way out. It's saying, let's just keep the status quo. I know we got this married thing, but we're doing okay on our own. Let's just kind of keep doing what we've been doing and keep operating and living independently, even though we kind of came together and got married. Um, Ideally, if you are going to do this way, I think you need to communicate more because your life is joined. So you probably are living together. You probably have joint bills. So you can't really completely operate separate. You got to figure out how are you going to share that, split the bills? Is somebody going to write somebody a check? Are you going to take half of them? So I feel like even though it's status quo, there's a lot more things you got to figure out and communicate
Yeah,
better.
there are some complications with that. And you
Right.
said you are communicating more, but I think you're communicating in a different way, at least than than you and I are communicating. So
Right.
you're communicating more like you would communicate with a roommate. So I
Right.
remember when shortly after graduating from college, I had my own house. I had a roommate that I was renting out to, and those were the conversations we had. It was all about how much do you owe me for the electric bill this month? How much is water and trash utility kind of work? And it's this negotiation back and forth around who's paying for what and why. And it feels more transactional than marriage to me. But I understand for some people, um, that's what they move to. And I think, at least again, I think the reason, and I could be jumping to conclusions here. So I hope somebody can correct me here. But I feel like a lot of the reason that this happens is because there's um, there's a need to hold on to what they have, right? There's a feeling of I'm going to lose control.
Yeah, to me, it keeps the what's mine is mine mentality and to say, I earned this, this is my money, it's in my account. And so to your point, I think it is about control or feeling that ownership over, hey, this is me, this is mine.
Or like I was saying earlier, it's about I'm ashamed of this baggage that I'm bringing into the relationship, and I want to hide, or it might even be under the thought of I want to protect the other person. I'm doing this out of selfless reasons to protect the other
Sure.
person from my baggage, but that's not really protection.
Right.
It will catch up.
I think one of the hard things under this method is it'd be more challenging to optimize your goals together when you're operating separately. Again, it's not that you can't, you can be successful in that, but it requires a lot more communication because you don't necessarily, maybe you have still have visibility and you can see both, but um, if you're operating kind of separately versus a single unit mentality, I think sometimes that could defer you a little bit and maybe not optimize your joint goals together.
Exactly. Now, it may not be this extreme, but I'm picturing in my head like a rowing team, for example. You've got a rowing team,
Ooh,
and
deep analogy.
when they're all rowing in the same direction, they're getting there fast. But
Yeah.
if you have one person on the rowing team facing the other way, you still might go one direction a little bit more than another, but you're not getting there nearly as efficiently as possible, right?
Or if you're like me, when you canoe with me, sometimes I have to pause and just take my oar out of the water.
Take the oar out of the water. Is that where you have to take the oar out because you need an extra cup of coffee that week, or you need to, I really got to go get a little extra something at the restaurant, and so that's kind of pulling the oar out of the water to recharge or something.
Putting
I don't
some
know.
water in the boat.
I'm trying to link up that analogy a little bit
No,
there.
but that's a good analogy.
Yeah. And I don't want to say this is all bad, because there are certainly instances where something like separate accounts, I think makes sense. And specifically, the one that comes to mind for me is when one person is coming into a relationship with significantly um, different or better assets, maybe, or larger assets, I should say, than the other person. Because then there's an issue of maybe it's around inheritance and making sure that inheritance that person's bringing into the relationship goes to entirely to their biological children, and there are legal reasons why it might be good to maintain separate accounts in those reasons. And so I, I would say that that's probably a small percentage of the cases, but there are cases where I think this makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on to the joint account, the joint method. So this is what I would say is the ideal scenario. So this is
That
my
wasn't
recommendation.
obvious by the last one.
It might have been obvious. I might have been giving away the answer here on where we're coming from. I really like and think this is the way to go. So I'm very much of the mindset, when, especially in marriage, when two become one, a big part of two becoming one is joining finances. So they say that where your money is, so is your heart. Your heart follows, or your money follows your heart, or your heart follows your money. It's hard to say which one is true, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. Is that by having a joint account, we're truly invested in each other, and more than just emotionally. Like all parts of our lives are connected.
Yeah. So I think the joined option is kind of the opposite of the separate. I think it's the easy peasy option versus what I said with the separate because it's all in one account. You know, it's one pot, it's one account. You don't have multiple things you're managing and having to communicate. And did I give you money? It's boom, it's one place, one stop shop, total visibility. Everybody has accountable. Yeah, I think that it makes it a lot more simple.
I was kind of hoping you'd start with maybe some kind of, like you did with the last one, some kind of reggae song talking about joints. But what you are
Sorry.
the song queen here.
I
Where
know.
where
I've
was that
already had
song?
2 songs. I feel like
Okay.
there's maybe a limit.
All right. All right. Missed opportunity. I'll let it slide this time. No, but yeah, I would agree. I think over the long term, it's the easier option. Over the short term, it's certainly harder though, because where I said before, in the separate option, you're able to you're able to avoid some of those difficult conversations, right? So people like us, where you have one person that's a strong saver, and one person that's maybe not buying $1,000 shoes every weekend, but certainly likes to spend money, right? Um, that's a recipe for some back and forth and for some tension, and you avoid that tension very easily, or maybe not very easily, but more easily with a separate account. And this having joint accounts, that forces you to have conversations and reconcile these differences.
Yeah, and if you don't talk about it right, you're probably going to have some troubles.
Right. So I think that's a good thing, because it forces you to have these conversations that you probably don't want to have,
Right.
but you have to have them, and ultimately that's going to be better for your relationship.
I think another negative point, a con on this one, is it can cause some judging and resentment because you have visibility to everything and you're seeing what that person does. And if you're seeing that spender and you're like, oh my goodness, you went to Starbucks 3 times this week, it can start to create some resentment and kind of judging what the other person is spending because you're seeing all of that and living it. And if,
Right.
especially if you're not talking about it and having those conversations and you're just watching it happen to you, it can create some animosity.
Yeah, and to that, to add on to that, the bad habits. So if it's more than just, oh, this person's have spending an extra $3 every couple of weeks on something like that, that could create animosity. But there could be more significant bad habits that someone's bringing into the relationship. Maybe it's something as severe as like a gambling addiction, right? And something like that could bring the whole family down. And so if you're dealing with something like a gambling addiction, then having joint accounts might not be the right answer, right? So you don't want that person with a gambling addiction to be bringing, like, withdrawing from all your retirement accounts and draining your life savings to fund a bad addiction. So uh, with all of these, there are exceptions, and we understand that. Um, yeah. So anyway, joint accounts, pulling your money together, I think is the best option. It sounds like you agree. We're in it together. We're married. So I think I would have heard by now if you didn't get on board with that. Um, eh, so third, we were going to talk about the hybrid approach. So
The
Heather,
best for the environment, right? The hybrid.
yes, exactly. Wow.
This is the
Oh.
this is the Prius of the options.
I
I know, honestly, actually, what I was thinking about it is it's kind of like the baby bear in the Goldilocks story, right? Where it's like it's just right. It's the best of both worlds. You get to keep it separate and you get it all together.
And I could see how that could be the case.
Yeah.
So I do, well I know, I know just said moments ago the joint method is the best. I definitely see a lot of great advantages to the hybrid, and I mean, I'm not judging anyone that chooses any of these options, but it makes the hybrid option look very, very tempting. So the hybrid option is more around how most of the money is joint and on joint accounts, but then you have these separate accounts in which individuals can spend whatever money is in there on whatever they want. They can do whatever they want with it. No questions asked. The other person isn't checking in, isn't vetoing anything. There's free reign. So what has me a little worried about this approach though is, especially if we're talking about separate bank accounts, is that now all of a sudden we have individual bank accounts, which makes it a lot easier to go down the path of hiding money, right? I'm not saying that happens all the time. I'm just saying it makes it easier to do things like hide money from your spouse. And it could evolve into it could eventually evolve into also just completely separate accounts. Like if we're like, oh yeah, we really like this process. I like having this autonomy. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think the key, again, in all of these is you still need to communicate. So just
exactly.
because if you have it separate, it does solve the problem on the joint about not having a resentment. If I've got my account and I want to go to Starbucks 3 times a week, you don't need to see that or judge me. It's, hey, this is my money. I can do with what I want. But you should still be openly communicating and trying not to have secrets, right? Um,
Right, right. And I also wonder, like, does this approach end up resulting in something that feels like you're getting an allowance every week?
Right. It could
S-
kind of feel like, hey, I'm just getting this. Here's my money. This is what I've got. I'm on this leash. Um, I think this one you really need to designate like what is coming out of the joint account versus what is in your personal account. So there's a lot of communication to be like, should this have come out of the joint account? Or wait a minute, you bought a new pair of pants. I thought that was your individual. And so I think this
Right,
one, in my opinion, back to my comment on the other two, this is the most complicated because now you're talking about three separate accounts. Now you got to figure out all these rules. What can be in here? What can be in there? This one feels like, grad school, right? Like the joint account was like grade school, individuals was like high school, and this is like master's program of complexity.
exactly.
So um so there's a lot of things to be figured out to make sure everybody's happy with how you're operating in this method.
Exactly. Yes, a pair of pants is a good example because you, certainly everyone needs a pair of pants, but you probably don't need that designer pair of pants. And so,
Or that many, like you, who one year spent $20 on your clothing budget in 1 year, which was a
what?
pack of
Me?
socks, versus someone like me who may, go shopping once a month or something and pick up some things here and there. You might be like, hey, dude, I had $20 on clothing. You had 2000. This is not fair. So, yeah, to your point, it could be just the value, spending more expensive clothing, or even the
The amount.
quantity,
True.
right?
True. And so, just to be totally clear, I think so. While I wouldn't classify us as a hybrid approach, I would say we have used in the past a little bit of a hybrid leaning approach in where we've had a concept of what we called pocket money, for lack of a better term, where we had a small amount of money every month that we would just say, okay, this small amount of money you can go blow on whatever you want. Not a big deal. We're not even going to worry about it. Beyond that, let's at least have a conversation about it. Not that we're not going to do it, but let's have a conversation about where this other money comes from.
Yeah, we kind of cheated and took the hack mode on the hybrid by just not having separate accounts and kind of just give doling out cash. So it's like, here you go, here's some cash. I don't care what you're doing with that cash. Take it and do whatever. So it was kind of the cheat method of doing the hybrid without having to
Yeah.
manage these separate accounts and I don't know, the
Yeah.
harder part of it.
Right, right. It kept things easier for us. Right. Okay. Well, um, yeah, I think also a lot around that whole hybrid approach, or just this concept of who pays for what. We had some friends that shared this concept with us called the family, and the family it was a conversation around when now is this something that the family is paying for, meaning the joint accounts are paying for, or is this something that I'm paying for out of my my hybrid separate account or my cash pocket.
Yeah, we totally stole that from our friends, and now we say, "Oh, the family is picking this up.
Yes.
Oh, the family."
It was genius. It was a genius way to refer
It
to it.
was.
So I love it. I love it. All right. Well, any further thoughts on this topic? I think we or should we transition to our thought of the day here?
Yeah, no, I think just a couple things that we would talk about on the joint. So obviously, it's pretty clear that we felt like that our recommendation would be to do a joint or maybe somewhat of a hybrid approach. So I think a couple reasons of why I'm doing this is I think it's good to stop thinking about your money that this is my money or this is his money. Because once you're married, you're together. So David and I love Jesus. We follow Jesus. And he mentioned earlier, he says, two become one flesh. And we think that means everything, bank accounts and all, we're one unit. And so I think it's really important to establish that as a baseline and not think, well, I made more money, or if a person decides to stay home and not work but take care of the family, they're entitled to just as much the money as the as the person bringing home the money and should be part of those decisions and making those decisions. So I think whatever you do, whichever these methods, I think it's easier with the joint to go away with that. But I think it's really important that you are a family and talking about the family and it's not his or hers anymore, that someone doesn't get a louder voice than the other person.
Exactly. Yes. It is real easy. And you talked about resentment earlier. I think that's where resentment can happen if someone feels like they're being left out and they're not an equal in a relationship. That's another place where resentment can build. We want to go into relationships as equals. Yeah, and we talked earlier also about the importance of transparency and honesty, and at the core of it, that's what communication is all about, is making sure that we're communicating in an open, transparent, and honest fashion. And hopefully you heard that us stress that as we went through all of these points, through all these different methods. No matter which method you go through, that honesty and transparency is critical.
All right, so the take home homework for you all. The topic, obviously, is how to do your finances. So, how are you as a couple currently structuring your finances and why? Is it working? Discuss whether you want to revisit this. Even if you've been doing it one way for many years, maybe you've been married 10 years, I don't know. I just challenge you to, think about, is this the right method? And if you do have your finances separate, is it really working? Is there a reason why you're operating that way that maybe is covering up or hiding some stuff from each other? So since we've kind of already shared our method of having a joint account, I thought it would be more fun to just react. So to share about how we went on this journey. So, you know, how did you, David, react when we got married and decided to combine our finances? How did it
Ooh,
make you feel? How did it go?
ooh,
Do you even remember how we decided?
yeah.
You're looking really
I'm looking a little
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable right now because I'm having some flashbacks. Yeah, I don't know if it's fair to call it PTSD, but it definitely having some thoughts and some feels about it. So essentially, I was very much in the camp of this terrifies me. So I I was in my late 20s when I got married, when we got married, and I was used to having total control of my money and saving and spending my money the way I like to do it. And now I was afraid I was going to lose that control. I was afraid I was going to have to run every purchase by you, and I do run a lot by you. Um, I was afraid that because you were more of a spender, that you might be an anchor dragging me down a bit, right? I also enjoyed then having a credit card where I could as we went into the marriage, I enjoyed having a credit card where I could kind of have some smaller purchases go in and I just pay that at the end of the month and you wouldn't necessarily know. So I kind of used that credit card even as a way to have that autonomy even after we were married. And I'm looking back and like, oh my goodness, I was really one of those people that that probably would have gone more towards that separate or more hybrid account model if given the opportunity. But I'm really glad I didn't. I'm glad, and I don't know who pushed who on going joint early on. We did that early on, but I'm glad we did.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't even remember talking about it. I don't even remember having a conversation about how we were going to operate. It
No,
was just like
assumed.
assumed that we were going to have a joint account. I think it's because my parents did it, and I was like, well, they're married, and like the people in my life that were married, that's how they operated, and I hadn't been on my investigative, you know, stance where I was asking everybody about how they manage their money yet. I just thought everybody had joint accounts, so we just kind of did it. But I was opposite of you. So I didn't even question that that's what we were going to do. But I was opposite of you. I think I was super naive because I was really excited. I'm like, all right, we are going to win. We got two incomes coming in. We only got one set of expenses. Boom, we are going to be rolling. And I didn't think it would have changed how I operated at all. I just was like, oh, we're going to be killing it. And it's not really what went down because
Reality
uh,
doesn't reflect that.
no,
Your
I mean, you
dreams.
would get mad at my spending and stress, and then I would feel like I was being controlled. And so, anyway, I think I went in naive, just thinking like, boom, our problems are gonna melt away with cutting our expenses in half. But actually, it took quite a few years to figure out a system that worked for us.
Well, I think the important lesson here is that yes, it's complicated and it can be messy combining finances, but what you learned is that it wasn't as easy as you thought it would be. It wasn't as smooth as you thought it would be. And I learned it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And so the truth was kind of somewhere in the middle. Like it's hard, but it's not terrible and it's healthy to do. And I think that's a good lesson to take away from at least our process of marriage. I don't know, what would you see?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, if you can have the conversation ahead of time, you'll be better off. Just go in with eyes wide open.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. This was an awesome conversation. I'm so glad we got to get into this. I'm looking forward to next week when we get into some more fundamentals. I don't want to spoil the surprise just yet, but we we want to start talking into some more basic concepts, some foundational concepts around finances and marriage here over the next few weeks. So looking forward to getting into those conversations here shortly. So, whether you're a spender or a saver, remember that your best financial life lies somewhere in the middle. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.